My family, when I was young, and my parents were very young, we camped at Martins Bay over the hill from Scandritz, and my father had spied down the other end of the beach some batches, and so he found out they were owned by a farmer, George Scandritt. Then the farmer told Dad, actually I do have another batch at Scandritz Bay. Well, we didn't know about Scandritz Bay, so Dad took us and then went and bought on the spot. He bought this batch for £500. We always would say, aren't we lucky we've landed in paradise? And it really felt like paradise whenever we were here. As a family, we always knew we were so lucky to have found this little piece of heaven on earth. So we purchased it in the 1960s. Before that it had been Mr. Moon and Mr. Light, and I believe that's why it's called the Moonlight Batch. But we never called it that, we just called it the batch. And we always came with friends, so we never came here just the 4 children. We always came with friends, so there was lots of topping and tailing. And Mum and Dad often brought friends as well, so there would be another couple in the double bed and their kids strewn around. There would be kids everywhere in pup tents and barbecues on the beach. When we knew we were coming to the batch, we were all so excited. We loved being here, and I think for me it was a really dreamy space. I would go out onto the rocks out there and I would examine all the rock pools, and I would catch little rock cod, put them in a bucket with some seaweed. We'd find the odd mussel and cook that up. We loved finding crabs, and they weren't that big, but my brother would boil them up on the beach for us. And we were all young, but we kind of did that sort of stuff. We made fires and we boiled things. We boiled cockles, and every now and again pippies would come into the bay, and we were always off up into the farmland. We were off exploring, going along the cliff lines. We would go out to Mullet Point and all along there. We never had homework or anything like that. It was just kind of freedom. Dad had rod holders at each end of the deck, and we would row out with our baited hooks and keep the line in here, and we'd row into the middle of the bay, and then we'd wind that up in the morning and have fish for breakfast. Next door, Mr. and Mrs. Hooper were very elegant. They were from Remuera, we were from Henderson, and we always felt like we were kind of disturbing the peace, and Mum was always trying to keep us quiet. We were never quiet enough. And Mrs. Hooper next door, she had these big Butterick pattern books that I'd never seen anything in my life, and she gave them to me, and I remember looking in them, and they were illustrated fashion books, I guess. And it's only really recently I've kind of remembered that and went, gosh, you know, that was probably one of my very early introductions into fashion, was through her beautiful books that she gave to me and let me cut up and scrapbook. Because this was a working farm when we came here, the cows were very much a part of our everyday life here. And so we would go to all milkings if we could as kids, and it was the most exciting. We used to like to help herd the cows in, and old Tom was the cow herder, and we learnt early that we had to respect Tom, and then George and he would milk the cows, and George would teach us how to milk the cows. We loved going to the cow shed because that was when the bull was put in the pen, and I actually got a very good life sex education from the milking shed, and so did all of our friends, and it would be the thing we'd delight to say, you've got to come to the milking shed and watch this. I was here as a child, then my stepkids came, so they were 4 and 5 when they first came here. They're now in their 40s, and my sisters and their babies came, so my nieces and nephews. Then I had my son 31 years ago, and so he came here as a little guy from a baby onwards. I think it made our family really a close family because we spent all of our childhoods, all of our kids' childhoods, we were all just in like a big tribe. My father built this. There was an shoddy old bench with no cupboards, and this came in the 60s. It's still here. I used to look up and watch George and Joan up on their terrace, and I'd watch the kids going around the rocks when I was a mum, and I'd watch up on the top there, watching people going for walks. I just loved standing at this bench. It was the best way to have a kitchen. And we played board games in the evening. You couldn't get the TV to work, there was always snow. On great nights we'd all be out on the deck and we would be having sing-songs and bonfires and just real old-fashioned kind of family time. And I think it all stemmed from living communally here in the weekends. I think the privilege of coming here as a child and having the freedom as a child, then being able to give that to our children, really shaped who I am. And it's when I come back like this even, I get it even more clearly how that really quite creative space, I guess, that imaginative space, I've always felt one with this place. It really grounds me as a New Zealander. It makes me feel like I am a New Zealander.